welcome to another episode of the You Speak English podcast. Thank you for hitting that play button and subscribing to our podcast channel. I'm Katza. In today's episode, we're going to discuss if we can master English in 6 months, like many people guarantee. But first, I'd like to say hello to George and Javier. How's it going, guys?
Hey, hi there. I'm pretty good. Good to be here again.
Hi, Katza. Hi, George. It's always a pleasure to have you guys having me.
Yes, a pleasure, guys. Well, I'd like to start by sharing my personal experience learning English. It actually took me at least 5 years to master English grammar. And vocabulary, well, I'm still in the process and will continue till the day I die because I do not know all the words, right? So either I die or migrate to another country, but I'm still learning vocabulary, right? But not to mention conversation, I sometimes still make mistakes. This I've achieved by attending schools where we had at least 10 hours of English class through elementary and high school. Even after I graduated from college, which brought me to practice much more, we didn't have less than 10 hours a week. So I started learning English when I was 4 years old and started watching movies without subtitles. One, because those movies were not subtitled on cable TV in Mexico when I was little. And second, because my dad kind of forced me into getting familiar with the language a couple of years before I even started elementary school. So for example, I used to watch movies with no subtitles and I would go, "Daddy, what are they saying?" And he would be like, "Oh, I don't know, figure it out." And I'm like, how am I going to figure it out? But yet it got me interested. It got me into the language because I love the language, obviously. But it took me more than 15 years to say that I can carry out a natural and a good conversation, right? And understand at a level of academic English, for example. So it wasn't until I moved to the States that I could say that I had mastered English up to a level B1 plus or so. And I wanted to discuss this topic with you guys because I want to give our audience all the precise information we can regarding this topic, because out there's loads of schools guaranteeing that people can master English in 6 months. So the question, George, is mastering English in 6 months, is it a myth or a reality?
It's a complete myth, complete lie. Because, I think, for anybody who claims that, and for people who are into our listeners, I think we got to first understand what it means to master a language, or what it means to learn a language. Okay, so I think in the understanding of in general, people, when they say learn a language, you'll learn a language in 6 months. I think the understanding is, just speak well enough to talk about in any context with anybody, about any situation and very fluently. All right. So can you do that in 6 months? No. And it's not only because I say so. There's extensive study in this regard. If anybody can learn in 6 months, even with the full immersion programs, saying that you can fully master language, there are only anecdotes about it. There's not a complete, there's no complete research, but no, definitely not. You can't.
Right. Javier, what do you think?
No, but not by a long shot. I think people might you might have heard an advertisement that say you'll be able to speak in 6 months, and like George said, if you want to like transmit something that's very basic, like to ask for you're in a train station, you want to ask for what time the next train comes by, or you want to order something at a small cafe, get your way around the city. If you want to go abroad and visit a place where they actually speak the language, that could be accomplished in 6 months. Given the fact, like George says, that if you have like a full day of like intensive teaching and practice, but it's not mastered by a long shot at all. I mean, I moved to the States when I was maybe like 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old, and I remember I was in the fifth grade. I had to repeat the fifth grade. And it took me about 2 years just to be able to say I can speak English. Living in
Right.
the States, 2 years, and I'm talking
Right.
about like going to school, having ESL classes, and being exposed to TV in English, radio in English, friends in English. And it took me about 2 years, to be honest.
Right. Right. Okay. So I know for a fact that something that helps me immensely to improve my English all the time is that I always have managed to be exposed to the language somehow. Let's say movies, TV shows, podcasts nowadays, videos, books, you name it. To me, input is key, but what other tips could we give the audience? So, what would be the ideal scenario to improve English learning fast? And what tips could we give the audience, George?
Well, you mentioned most of them, if not all, being exposed. I think that's a key word, exposure to a language. Because like I mentioned a while ago, there are studies in saying, well, what is the average time somebody learns English? Okay, because we did answer the question: is it possible to learn a language, in 6 months? In this case, English. The answer is no. But I think also the expectation is there a time for, the right answer? In how long it would take a person to learn a language? No, there's no right answer. Okay, the answer varies a lot, and one of the key words is exposure, and it also there are many factors. Okay, there are many factors on the methodology, the kind of student you are, if you're a willing student or you're being forced
Shy.
into learning, if you are under the right conditions, if you're using the material, and it also depends where you're living. Okay, so it's very different, the way you learn a language. If you're learning where the language is spoken, for instance, if you're living in the United States or Canada or England or any other English-speaking country, of course, it's going to be a lot faster than learning a language. For instance, in this case that we are in Mexico, it's different. Okay, it's not impossible, but it's a very different, speed. Why? Because, well, if you're living in for instance, in Canada, well, you're not only if you're any of you're learning English, you're not only learning English within the classroom environment, but when you walk out of the classroom, well, you'll have to order food, you'll have to survive outside, and you'll be forced to use English. So that
Right.
is key, right? Not only are you using English within the classroom, but you also have this exposure time outside the classroom. Whereas if you're learning English, for instance, here in a Spanish-speaking country, well, you're limited to the number of hours that you have in the classroom. So going back to the kind of student you are, if you want to increase the speed, all right, or reduce the number of hours of learning a language, yes, one of the top recommendations is do not rely only in your class time. You say, okay, I have 4 hours of instruction, or I have 3 hours of instruction with a teacher. Is that enough? It'll work, but at a lower speed. But if you want it to really work, you need to be exposed to the language with the things you mentioned right now, Casa. Podcasts, movies, music, reading. So you increase the number of hours or the amount of time that you're going to be exposed to the language. So that is key: exposure to the language. And there is a time in if you want to call it in number of hours, in average, if you're under the right conditions, with the right methodology, the right teacher, and the right attitude, the positive atmosphere. There is a study, and it varies though. Okay, it varies, but it's anywhere between, and I'm talking about getting to a level where you mentioned a B2, even a C1. For those of you who do not know this, this is based on a benchmark. It's called the Common European Framework of References. There's also the one. There's another one called American Council of the Teaching of Foreign Languages, and there's one more benchmark. It's called the Integrity Language Roundtable. All of these are just giving you, okay, what levels of competencies people have in terms of language. And but if we're gonna use the one that's the most common one, the Common European Framework of References, I would say to get to a C1, where you are almost bilingual. Okay, you're pretty much very good at the language. I'm not saying you're going to master it 100%, but you're very good. It's anywhere between an investment of time between 900 to 1,200 hours of exposure. This doesn't necessarily mean being in front of a class, in front of a teacher, taking formal lessons. This is all complete with the teacher and with all the different strategies that you were mentioning right now, Katzen.
Right. For example, one of the things that pretty much when I was studying English, I lacked a lot of was conversation. Javier, what is the input that you would like to give our audience about the exposure to conversation? How is that going to improve their English, and how can they really rely on conversation as one of the most important tools for their learning?
I have to go back to one of the boxing analogies. They say that the best boxers are not the ones that are good with a heavy bag and they're good with a speed bag. They're not good with a double-ended bag. They're good in the ring, because the ring, the sparring, if you may, it's really a combination of all those exercises you ever done.
Right.
All the running, all the push-ups you did, it should show there in the sparring that you do. And if you see the great fighters, Pacquiao, Canelo, if you may, if you're a fan of him, they change sparring. They don't just spar with one guy. They just keep changing one guy every 13 minutes. A new fresh guy. But they're top champions, and they still spar.
Right.
You might think like, oh, he's got it made, right? He doesn't need to train. He knows how to box. No, he's got to keep up his skill. It doesn't work that way. And I remember when I first finally got the chance to say that I could speak English, it was a time that I was in elementary school. A friend of mine, classmate, asked me to translate for the teacher. So I did, because he had been absent. Teacher told him, like, well, just need to get a paper from the nurse to justify his absence. And I told him in Spanish, and then the guy said, thank you very much. And I said, well, thank you. And then the teacher said, goodbye, Javier. And I'm like, wow, I can speak English. Immediately, I'm not kidding, I went to somebody else. Hey, what's your name? I'm Javier. What do you do? And then I immediately started putting into practice what I knew. And I just forced myself into learning new stuff. And every single day I got out there with the playground and talked to anybody that would talk to me. It's all about input. And like George mentioned, I could probably summarize it in one word. It's motivation. It's passion. Think of something that you enjoy. What do you enjoy? Cooking, movies, running. I know people that love running, and they don't feel it as a task. They see it like, "Ooh, we're going running or we're going dancing." Remember when we used to go dancing young? People could dance for 3-4 hours on straight.
Oh yeah.
Paid to go dancing. You would pay. Remember, they used to pay to go dancing.
Yeah.
And they would pay and have a good time and go home super happy. They were not like, "Oh my God, I worked out too much."
No.
No.
Uh-huh.
English has to be part of your integral life plan.
Right.
It has to be something that, like you said, Katya, you had input of all sorts. I've always liked music, so for me, that was like my way in to the language, music and movies, which I also love. Do something that, as input, like George said, something extra aside from the class, but something that you enjoy, and believe me, they will help you a great deal.
Right. All right. Let's go to the last section of our podcast, and this is about the advice. Any advice you'd like us to take from this episode, George?
Yeah, as I mentioned, for the different factors that I mentioned a while ago, what it would involve, how much time it would get, it would take for a person to learn English in a, an advanced level. I think, one of the things that I've noticed with students is that they want to be perfect in terms of grammar. Okay, they feel if they don't say things right with the correct grammar, they're not confident, and they want to stop, and then until they say it right, and then they start risking it. And I've always told students, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay, because it's there's there are two sides to the language. One is
Right.
like, are you going to be very accurate? That means you can speak with perfect grammar, or do you want to be fluent? And sometimes people learn at different paces. Not everybody learns the same, even in terms of their skills. Even if they're sometimes at the same level of English, but their different skills, the different skills can be different for each one. For example, reading, listening, writing, and speaking. Some people are better at reading, some people are better at listening and speaking. In this case, when it comes to speaking, I advise people to take risks, and to motivate them to speak, even knowing that they will probably make mistakes. Okay, that mistakes can be fixed. What is harder sometimes is to persuade students or people to make mistakes, and probably to feel embarrassed. And it's something that happens to everybody, right? When we're trying something new. And I always compare it with, Javier likes to compare it with boxing, and I try to compare it with music, or with dancing. English is like learning any other skill. Okay, if you're comparing with music, if you're a student of music, you could probably learn all the notes, and the keys on the piano. If you're learning, the piano. But if you don't put your fingers on the piano, your hands, and start playing the piano every day for hours and hours, it's not going to happen. Same thing. You can learn all the grammar in the world, but if you don't practice, if you don't find moments or opportunities of practice, you're not going to be a very fluent speaker. You could probably be a great reader and grammarian,
Hmm.
but not a very good speaker. Okay, if that
Right.
if that is your goal, to speak English. So
Right.
my advice is that find opportunities, conversation
To
clubs.
speak.
There are many out there. We have one.
Right.
Obviously, to all our listeners, you are invited. And yeah, practice. It sounds like a cliche, but it happens. That's the only way. It's a skill. You need to practice, practice, and
It's
practice.
like a muscle. You need to
You
build
have to take a dive. You have to
it.
take a dive. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll close off if I may, with this anecdote. I think by the time I was at the end of junior high, I was speaking to everybody and anybody that would talk to me. I just wanted to practice.
Right.
And I was actually talking to a janitor once, and we had a nice conversation. And then he asked me a question. He said, "Are you Mexican?" And I said, I proudly said, "Yes, yes, I am." And I said, "Why?" I said, "Because you sound Mexican." And he turned around and left. I don't know what he meant by it, to
This
be
is not a
honest.
bad thing, by the way.
I don't think he meant anything by it, like a bad thing. But I
Right.
thought, I don't want to sound Mexican. I thought I sounded pretty good. And believe it or not, what I started doing is just started focusing more on accent correction, intonation, more pitch. I watched a lot of TV. I would watch my friends' mouth, look at their lips a lot. How they use the position of their mouth
Right. Right.
and tongue. And that, to me, I went from probably a B1, B2, to probably a C2, but it took me about 4 years. I'm not kidding. All of high school.
Yeah.
So it is possible. It can be done, but
Yeah.
it's not going to be overnight.
But you
It's
were
going to take.
100% exposed.
Even that, but
Close
you'd
to
be surprised, because I know people. For example, my aunt had lived in the States for about 12 years at least when I moved there, and she never learned. She just never learned. She got it. Once I started learning, she's like, "Hey, your English is getting pretty good. You're gonna help me," and I started helping her translate. And so I got better, and she didn't. You got to get out there. Like George says, how do you learn to dance? Well, you get out there and dance. You might get in the middle so nobody watches you.
Yes.
You don't want to feel a bit embarrassed. But that's how you learn. And then you go back home and you practice in front of a mirror, some more steps. And then come Saturday night, you try again. And you got to lose that fear.
Right.
You mentioned something important right there. Some people, not all, might believe that to speak English, you need to sound American or you need to sound British. That was debunked years ago. Okay, that was debunked. You don't have to sound American or British to be fluent. Okay. As a matter of fact, I know people who are more fluent in English, but have an accent, right? Have an accent, and they're very fluent, contrary to other native speakers that are not very fluent, and that's just their personality. Okay, it doesn't have to do with that. So, and I think there's a misconception here between pronunciation and fluent and accent. Okay, you can have an accent that has there's nothing wrong with it. You can have a Hispanic accent, an Italian accent, a French accent, but you can be very fluent. And I think here, as long as you have a good pronunciation, meaning that the words that come out of your mouth and the way you enunciate and you say them do not interfere with your communication, and people can understand you clearly, I think you've made it already there.
Oh, by all means. I mean, we talked about this several times in other podcasts about Salma Hayek, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jackie Chan, Jean Reno, people that come from all walks of life, and they're in Hollywood. They're making movies, and nobody ever complains that, can't hear you. What is he saying?
An accent.
He has an accent.
French,
I don't know what he's saying.
You sound French, right, Jean Reno? Yes.
That's the one thing I heard. Like, if you have a French accent, don't worry about it. Just keep it. Everybody loves a French.
Exactly.
Everybody loves a French accent.
Yeah, they do.
That's unfair.
All right, guys. Very good. Thank you guys so much for all of this input. I think it was so good, and I think it's going to be so beneficial for everyone listening out there. And it's our time to say goodbye, George.
Well, well, thank you for having me again here. It's always a pleasure being able to share some of the ideas and experience that I have. And well, thank you all, and hope to see you again here soon.
Same here, guys. Just as a form of advice, you're gonna make mistakes. We all have. We all did. I don't know anyone that's ever learned a language and didn't make any mistakes, to be honest. But it's how you own up to the mistake. I like the fact how maybe foreigners, particularly Americans, they would probably make a mistake in Spanish and they'll laugh it off. They'll say, "Oh, gringo, tonto, stupido," and they'll laugh it off and they'll just keep going at it. They'll keep practicing their Spanish because that's what they're in Mexico for.
Right.
They're not gonna. Most of us Mexicans would be like, "Oh, they laughed at me." I remember one time, I think I mentioned it before. I told a teacher that I had a headache in my stomach.
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought that headache meant pain, And he laughed at me, and I didn't take it personal. I just took it as, I wonder why he laughed at me. Then I had to look it up, and I realized, and I learned from the mistake. You're gonna make mistakes, own them up, and just fix them. That's all. You will get better. Trust me.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, guys, thank you so much. This is it for today. Thank you to all our audience out there. Remember to subscribe to our channel. If you like this podcast, please share it with all your friends. And please visit our blog where you will find an article related to this topic. Okay? Take care. See you.
Bye.
Until next time.
See you, Katza. See you, Javier. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye.